All right, everyone. I'm going to get Alicia brought in here to our live stream. I think spirits, Alicia, are a little bit higher in the world of immigration today. And Alicia's, she wasn't going to be joining me today, but we've got a little bit of a delay here on a flight to pick a family member up. So we're happy to have you here, Alicia.
Yeah, it's interesting times. I know a lot of people have been reaching out for consults because there's been so many invitations in December.
Yeah, it's been a good day for people who have been patient and waiting. And these last rounds of invitations, I'm just gonna see if I can slide over here. And I think that, we just before we went live here today, we'll spread this one out here so everybody can see it. But we had just today another round of invitations, and surprise, surprise, this round is French. But you know what? I don't feel so bad about the 6,000 French, because if we go back here and we look at the previous rounds, we just had a nice CEC here of 5,000 shortly after another 6,000 on December the 10th. So it surprisingly pushed it down to 520 for people, and then 515. So for those who have been waiting patiently, I know we've got a number of clients that are absolutely ecstatic. And of course, Alicia, the messaging does not change. 399 was the low score for French. Learn French, you guys. French is absolutely everything. So it's an interesting world, an absolutely interesting world we're in. Okay, we'll wait a little bit for people to connect in. If you are tuning in for the first time, make sure you give us a shout out, because we love to hear where everybody's connecting in from. And this is the place where you can get your questions answered about Canadian immigration. Alicia and I have been doing this for many, many years now. And every Wednesday morning at 10 a.m., we try to go live more or less 10 a.m. And I think never before have we been busier in our practices, which is just a product of the challenging circumstances that so many people are in. But what a great Christmas present for people. That's all I have to say about that. And Alvin says, yeah, look, another CRS score, 399. So, and then we've got Be Curious here, who said, recently got a COPER. How could I make the most out of the pre-arrival services if I'm based out of Canada? Thank you. So we'll get into that. We'll answer that question in just a little bit. But the reality is, be curious. Whatever you need, just access it. And the best way to do it is explore. So the pre-arrival services come in many different forms. And so if you are, if you've got your COPER, it'll help you to figure out how to prepare when you come. Potential jobs, different things, housing, all the essential things you need to get set up in Canada. So that's I don't know how many other countries do that, but it's one service that's definitely beneficial for people for sure. All right. Let's see who we've got connecting in here. We've got I love ML. Great. It's supposed to be MA though. I love Mark and Alicia. That's what it's supposed to be there. Good to have you connected in. All right. So what do you think, Alicia, about all of this? What do you think?
Well, I mean, the good news is this is a lot of impetus and I guess momentum for 2026. And so most of basically everybody who's going to be invited right now is looking at getting their EAPR within the next 60 days. So these are all going to kind of spill into 2026. And so we're looking at the levels and, the allocations for 2026. But it is really good news because people have been waiting a long time, Mark. I know I've got clients whose profiles are just starting to expire, and now people who they finally got an ITA, and then we go to look at their language test and it's like, uh-oh, it expires in January. What do we do? How do we get this done? Right? So that's if you got an ITA and you've had your profile sitting in the pool for a very long time, go back and check your language test. Make sure that they're still valid, because if it's going to be over 2 years old by the time you submit your EAPR, that it's expired, right? So make sure that you go check that carefully. Check your passport validity, make sure your ECAs are 5 years validity, so they tend not to expire quite as quickly, but double check your documents, make sure they're valid.
Yeah, exactly. And so what we're seeing now is that the government recognizes that it's time to ramp things up for the new year. And some people have been asking a lot of questions who have seen in their portal that their confirmation of permanent residence appears to be issued or very near issuance, but they haven't received the request to complete the e-Coper portion within the online portal. And we've had a lot of people, some have booked consultations wondering what's going on. Why is this happening? Well, it's pretty clear that when it comes to people who are already in Canada, for 2025, they have met their quota. They are right on top of it. And so they're waiting a few weeks until 2026 rolls around. And all of you who are kind of stalled out a little bit waiting for your e-Coper to be finalized, you're going to start to see things moving in January. So lots of positive news. And I hope that everyone who's tuning in here, just recognizes it. Okay, let's see what we've got going here. I'm looking at myself here, and my audio does not seem like it's syncing very well with my screen, but that's okay. Everybody can figure it out. Okay, let's see what we've got for other comments and questions. We've got, let's see here. Study Thrive says, "Hey, I'm joining in from Kelowna on a delayed flight to Calgary with a wonderful lady who just told me about this podcast. Greetings, Alicia." Hey.
Hey, Mom, I'll get you when your flight gets here.
That's awesome. So cool. Special guest shout out there. Awesome. All right. Well, let's just like as far as the announcements, we've talked about what's been happening with the rounds of invitations, which is very positive. And just to go back here for those of you who are connecting in, if we can go back. Oh, it's doing this to me. Just give me a second. I got to keep my profile live here. Okay, so if we go back to our web here and we take a look, so we can see just recently they have done a lot of draws. So for the month of December, this has been one of our busier months for sure. So since December the 8th until today, we have had, you can see here, 12, 17, 18, 9, almost 20,000 invitations issued. And when you have large volumes like that, the natural consequence is that the CRS score starts to drop. And so we've seen that there was a healthcare draw. The PNPs are kind of holding fairly steady. They're still kind of low, although this one here was a little bit higher at 1,123. And I'm not exactly sure why this one, a number of people popped in, other than provinces are now starting to recognize that, okay, we are going to get our quota. We've seen what the annual levels plans tell us. And if we look at the levels plans, I'm actually going to pull this up here. We'll do the levels plans for 2026. See which one we can pull up here, supplementary information. So we can see now that the provinces have a little bit of comfort that the permanent resident rounds of the number of nominations that they have is going to go back up. So 91,500. And so because of that, they're starting to now, the people that have been sitting in the queue, not receiving nominations, are now starting to see them. So, this all happened at the beginning of November. So we've had a month, and now the provinces are starting, to issue those express entry stream nominations. And because of that, that's what's starting to drive now more people who are receiving ITAs under the provincial nominee categories. And so it's not surprising that a big cohort happened right here on December the 8th. And then, only a smaller one happened here with only 399, but that's pretty much everyone that was in the pool. So 1 week later, there wasn't a whole ton more new ones that came in with the nominations. So all of this makes sense. Not surprising, once again, that we have for French just unbelievable numbers. And if we look at these numbers, when I was, let's pull it up here, do a little switch here. So you can see just since, well, I don't even know what the best way of calculating this is, because we've got just large draws each month. There's been very large draws. You can see we had over 10,000 in October, 10,500 invitations issued. And Alicia was asking, well, what is the lowest one? Well, for French language, we've got a 399 here. It was at the beginning of year, they did that big 7,500 where it pushed it all the way down to 379, which I think was close to the lowest, if I'm not mistaken.
There was
So,
a
oh, no,
336, yeah,
there was a
but it was last year.
336. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, last year. And once again, that's when they did, a large one. And yeah, these just keep piling up. A large one, 365 and 336. And there's a reason, guys, that 1 year later, over 1 year later, why the minimum scores, even though we're still doing the large draws, are still staying fairly high. And that's because more people are studying French. So the more people you have that can hit that NCLC level 7, while at the same time already held a little bit, a fairly higher, like their human capital was a little bit higher. It's causing these to stay fairly high, even though we've had large draws. So it's an interesting world that we're in right now. And I think ultimately what we're seeing, at least in December, is giving us some positive vibes. 5,000 right back after doing a 6,000, 11,000 draw to see it go from 520 to 515. Yeah, it's a really, really good positive time for people. So
Yeah. I know a lot
that's
of
some
people
positive
were
news.
asking us to use the crystal ball. When would you get down to a 512? We were pretty, oops, that way. There we go.
I got it with you. I got you.
We were
There it
pretty
is.
pessimistic about a
Yeah,
512, and now
yeah,
515 is the closest we've been for a long
yeah.
time.
Yeah, that's all that it takes is to do that, is just to, yeah. 1 second here. I got to get my crystal ball lined up. I'm not sure why it's not working there. There we go. Okay. All right. Now's the time for you to drop your questions in here for us, and we'll do our very best to try to answer them. If it's your first time, let us know. It's great to have you joining us. And as always, like I said, let us know where you're tuning in from. Okay, let's start here with Holy Vegetable Juice. Holy Vegetable Juice. Well, that's quite the handle there. Do I need proof of funds letters from all my financial institutions in addition to Canadian banks? I have accounts with 4+ banks from my home country with which I have minimum balances. How do you deal with this within the express entry system?
And I think, Mark, I'm trying to remember, I'm pretty sure we did a podcast on settlement funds. And
Mm-hmm.
so one of the things we have as a resource for people, it's totally free. You can find it if you go to our Holthe Law website, and then you go into resources, and then you go back to the podcast. So Mark's kind of showing you here what that looks like. But if you go up to the top toolbar, and then you go into resources and you go into our podcast, you can see that you can access it through Apple or Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcasts. And we did a whole series. We've been working on a whole series for Express Entry. So we've called it Express Entry Getting It Right because there's so many questions that people have that come up over and over again, and they're legitimate questions. And we wanted to try to answer those questions as comprehensively as possible for people so that, they can search this podcast and go and find, hopefully, some direction that they need. So this is on settlement funds. Keep in mind that not everybody has to prove settlement funds. So take a look at your invitation to apply that you got or that hopefully you will be getting. And if it says that you were invited under CEC, good news, you don't need to prove settlement funds. If it says that you were invited under FSW, like under a targeted draw, francophone, or one of the other targeted categories, you might have to prove settlement funds. If you were invited under P&P, it's a little bit more complicated. We can talk about that as well. But basically, you have to prove, if you do have to prove settlement funds, that you have over and above your liabilities, your loans, your mortgages, outstanding debt, that you have enough funds over and above that for your number of family members. So whatever you put as your number of accompanying family members, if it's two of you, you're looking at 19,001 Canadian dollars, for example. You've got to take a look at your accounts as the principal applicant. If you've got a spouse, then you can look at joint accounts with that spouse. But between the two of you, make sure that whatever bank accounts you're using, you can show, in addition to your liabilities, your loans, your credit card debts, that you are over that minimum settlement fund threshold.
All right. Next question we have here is from Calgary X1T. It says, and this is an interesting one, Alicia, because he says, "Hello, Mark. Is it possible for basically the CRS score to go up? I think they said will boost during the EAPR without changing any info. The education and skills transferability education added 53 points in total from the original score. Um, the reality is, if sometimes if an individual has worked more, in other words, they were at 1 year and 11 months or something, and then it rolled over to 2 years, that potentially could increase score. But realistically, a 53-point swing is not something that we typically see just by completing the EAPR. And I'm assuming that's what has happened here. So you got your ITA with the score that you thought, you answered the questions and completed information, and now it's showing you a higher score. So usually if there is time that has passed and your work history is increased, maybe, but generally that's a pretty big jump. And yeah, it's hard to tell exactly what might be triggering that. I don't think they've returned the job offer points, that's for sure. So yeah, we'd have to look at that, Calgary, and recommend that you book a consult and we can take a look, because you have to be careful that you haven't somehow entered in information that's just incorrect. All right. Okay, next here is the dollar spiker, and it looks like it's the same. I wonder if we got a pattern here. CRS changed post ITA. Pre ITA showed 2+ credentials, bachelor's plus MBA. Okay. After clicking check score post ITA, CRS shows masters only. ECA, MBA, 1-year masters, that normal behavior needs fix. Well, the reality is if you're getting points for a master's, whether you have another bachelor's degree or not, it's not changing anything. Your MBA is still your highest credential. So the scores itself shouldn't change. Alicia, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, one thing that you can go and double check is what did you input in your education fields, and what's your ECA? So take a look. If you look, there's a detailed CRS points breakdown, and you can take a look at the grid and you can see that always a master's is going to be giving you more points than, a degree, a bachelor's plus a post-secondary 2-year degree. So as long as that bachelor's was 3 years and you have another post-secondary diploma and you've got an education credential assessment, or maybe it was Canadian education, those two are still going to be lower than a master's level. So it's weird that you're
Yeah.
getting different points calculations.
Yeah, it's quite unusual. Quite unusual. All right. Johanna says, I got an ITA. Oh, that's positive. We've got something for Johanna here. There we go. Get the applause going. Regarding gift deed, should I upload it under proof of means of financial support or optional documents? This is actually a good question. When I am uploading anything that relates to a specific document that I'm, within the personal document checklist, I tend to include any letters of explanation or other documentation like that within that section, and especially gift deeds, because a gift deed in a way is it's almost replacing, to some extent, not replacing, but it adds to the bank statements that you're including, or the letter from the bank that confirms where the money came from. And IRCC will routinely request further information if they see large deposits of money into your account just shortly after receiving an ITA or before. And they're going to want to know the source of that. So gift deeds are really important. It's something we cover extensively in our Express Entry Accelerator course. And within the course, if I go down to my favorite module, which is module 6, we have a section entirely devoted to mastering your documents. And within this section here, when it comes to proof of funds, I've got so many individual videos here. We need a separate page here. Go to 2. So I have a proof of funds section, and in here, it's so important that we have devoted a bunch of different gift deed samples, including just a detailed explanation of how to make sure what you're providing will be accepted by IRCC. So if you're outside of Canada and you need to provide proof of funds, you're not drawn under the CEC, then gift deeds can be a really, really important component if you are getting money from your parents, for example. But one thing I do want to highlight to everyone is that, generally speaking, family gives money, friends loan money. So you may run into a little bit of an issue if you're getting a gift deed from a friend who's just magically giving you $25,000 to settle in Canada. So you might have a little bit of an uphill battle trying to convince immigration that that's actually a gifted funds and not some kind of a loan that you're going to pay back later. All right. Okay. Next on our list here is Tanya. And Tanya says, hello guys, regarding proof of means, bank do not get access to date of opening of each account. Will it be an issue as they will give only a testimonial letter? Want to tackle that one, Alicia?
Yeah, and so IRCC's got some specific guidelines in terms of what they want for settlement funds and proof of settlement funds and letters from the bank. And they're very picky about it. And it is rare that I find a bank from anywhere in the world, sometimes it's Canada, that will actually provide a letter in the format and with all the information that IRCC requests. It's pretty rare. So often you have to cobble together the best that you can. So requesting that letter from your financial institution. Sometimes it's being able to go back and show screenshots if you've got online banking to show when your accounts were opened or an opening date for each account, the account number that you're the named holder of that bank account, and then what your average balance has been over the last 6 months. So try to get that letter. You can go to IRCC's completeness check and get that blurb of exactly what they want in the bank letter. But often, if the bank doesn't give you exactly what you want, it's not on bank letterhead, it's not signed by the account branch manager, then you're going to have to get what you can and then cobble together your additional proof.
Perfect. All right. Next one. JB says, good morning. In the EAPR question regarding serious disease, mental health disorder, is the answer yes if with history of PTB and ongoing anxiety? Um, what is PTB? Alicia, do you know what that is?
Mm,
We're not
no.
sure what that acronym stands for. But when it comes, the way I approach this, okay, if I have any doubt about whether or not it would be considered a serious illness, I disclose it. And then I leave it up to immigration on what to do. Because ultimately, your immigration medical, if it's done properly, is going to capture anything that could be considered an inadmissibility from a medical perspective. So you don't also want to be in a situation, although I haven't seen immigration go after someone for misrep for saying no to a serious health condition, and then the immigration medical found them medically inadmissible. But you do want to be careful. And our practice in our firm and with all of our clients is always to be, uh, much more proactive when it comes to disclosing.
Yeah. And the other thing I'd say on that, because I've had a number of consults with people who are worried about this, is if you had any sort of medical condition where you had to take time off from work and you had a medical leave, and you've got that documented in your work history, or if it's in like a gap in time because maybe during your studies that you had a gap because of a medical leave, because of a medical condition, immigration will know that. They will see that. And so be upfront about it because you're absolutely right. Um, when you look at medical inadmissibility, that would be a reason for inadmissibility, but you have an opportunity to respond. You have that chance to do a procedural fairness letter and then
Mhm.
to give your medical expert opinions. Hopefully, you can gather that ahead of time. And if they have something back from NHQ, then they will debate about it and whether it's over that cost threshold. So you can take a look at medical inadmissibility. That cost threshold is fairly high. So if your medications, if your condition is under control, take a look at if you're not going to be over that cost threshold, you're not going to be found medically inadmissible. But you could be found to be misrepresenting if you're actively hiding information from IRCC. So be careful with that because misrep has a 5-year bar.
Exactly. All right. Excuse me. Next one on our list. This is a continuation from JB. It says, is the upfront medical exception still applicable if previous medical is within 5 years with surveillance requirement complied and remain inside Canada since arrival? So I always approach this with caution. So if you are uncertain because the medical needs to have been clear, um, I always would go and get another immigration medical. I wouldn't rely on the policy in that circumstance. So in your situation, I would recommend that you go get another one. It may be that immigration looks at it and it was all the surveillance cleared and there wasn't an issue. But the reality is I just wouldn't take the chance in the context of such a volatile world. It's such good news for people who received ITAs recently, but the reality is immigration is still ruthless, absolutely ruthless in their processing. And so you want to make sure that you're ahead of the game and not giving an officer any room or reason for refusal.
Yeah, and we actually pulled up the temporary public policy last time on the medicals,
Mhm.
and it it actually says that it's only if you have certain coding, so M1, M2, M2-3, or M3, that you can use that old medical. And so if
Yeah.
you don't know what your coding is on that initial one, definitely go get a second.
Yeah. Okay, Dollar Spiker says ITA under Express Entry PNP Alberta Tech, CEC eligible. Can I use the job reference offer letter instead of bank funds as proof of funds? So
Okay,
yeah,
so
Alicia, want to tackle this is your wheelhouse here.
this is where it gets complex because like I said when we were talking about settlement funds, if it says CEC, you're good. If it says FSW, you got to prove. If it says PNP, you got to dig deeper on your ITA. So if you got an ITA because you did an express entry linked program like Accelerated Tech under AAIP, then basically you have to prove that you meet all program eligibility criteria for the PNP. So make sure that you're proving that you meet all requirements, either for CEC or FSW, because that's a prerequisite to get into your express entry accelerated tech subcategory. So you'll want to prove that you have it. If you meet all the eligibility requirements for CEC, then you don't normally need to provide settlement funds as long as you show you can establish and you have an intent to reside in Alberta. Now, I don't know if you're already working here or not. Maybe because hopefully under that accelerated tech, you have that job offer, you're actually working here. Theoretically, in some circumstances, you could not be here yet, but there's no like in Ontario, sometimes you can prove income from the job. That doesn't apply here. It's just that your employer has to meet all the eligibility criteria. So the wage that they're offering you has to be a high enough wage to be able to justify the position, and that has to be on the company has to be on the
Mm-hmm.
NAICS code, and your position has to be on the tech list.
Yeah, exactly. And this is another little segue. So it's very rare now that we don't have a blog post of some form on this topic. So you can see a proof of funds in the provincial nominee programs under express entry. So this blog post here addresses a lot of the things that we're talking about right now. And all you need to do, go to our website, go to our blog, and we have a search feature here. So if we want to find proof of funds, whoops, let's type in the right stuff here. Generally speaking, that search, which now seems to work a little bit better, is going to pull up the various topics that are going to work. Now that one kind of jumped out of the way on me here, but you can see right here. So use that search feature, go check out those, as well as, of course, our YouTube channel. And there are so many different videos and content that we've created specifically for many of the questions that you guys are asking right now. All right, shout out to Anatoly once again, tuning in from Toronto. Wish you a great day too, our friend. All right. And then we've got the user KYFL. Hey, Mark and Alicia, for online US master's study in Canada, should I put the country of study United States or Canada, which is more appropriate to write? Okay, so he's studying in master's in the US, but living in Canada, I think is what we've got here.
hmm
Yeah.
And this gets pretty complex because you do want the system to properly show your residence because that's going to affect when you have to apply for and get police certificates.
These certificates.
And so be careful with this one. So what I normally recommend is that when you're listing your education, you of course list the institution, so the full name of the school from which you're doing it. And then sometimes you can put in brackets remote study, and then you're going to put that you're physically present in whatever city in whatever country.
Exactly. All right, next question. This one's from Prabhat. It says, working as a cook in Northern Ontario since 3 months. Is it good to move for another job like administrative assistant or pharmacy assistant for PR? I have 1.5 years left in my postgrad work permit. That one is one of these, a little bell, where we tell you to go to our site and click on the link that takes you right here to speak to a lawyer and book a consultation. The reason we say that is because this really is legal advice. And ultimately, whether or not you stay where you're at or whether or not you move to another location requires a lot of information about you. And in the course of a live stream on YouTube, we never get enough information to be able to adequately answer your question. So I'll share a little bit of insight. So I had a whack of consults yesterday, a lot. And a couple of them were this exact question. We're in Alberta or we're in Ontario, and we're wondering if we should stay or what we can do to increase our chances. And there may very well be a move that you could make in the next 1.5 years that gives you a greater chance of either securing a PNP nomination or through express entry. But in order to give advice on that, we really need a lot more information. When I have people like that, one of the things I drill into all of them is that I don't focus as much on the various PNP programs. I just don't. Because any good program that seems to attract a lot of candidates, well, candidates will go there. Candidates will move there. Candidates will apply. And usually by the time people clue in that, hey, this is a good program and then move, well, then the program is so saturated, it's no longer this great thing. Think of the Ontario Trade Program, right? They just got recently suspended because of fraud. So once you've got a good program, then all of these people start piling in. Some not so legitimate. And then what happens is when the program's overwhelmed and they have concerns about program integrity, then the natural tendency both for the federal and provincial governments is to just shut them down. So instead of focusing on which program you might be eligible in determining where you're going to move, I instead focus on who your employer might be. Because every province has programs that are supported by employers. And if you have an employer that is supportive of you, then usually there might, if there's a pathway available, they'll be able to help you to get in there and be competitive. But not only that, if you have an employer that's supportive, and depending on the location that you're working in, you may have, or the occupation, the level of wage that you have, you may then have opportunities to apply for LMIAs to extend your permit to buy time, if time is what you need. So I always advise my employees, or my clients, I should say, that they should consider first who their employer is and if they're going to be supportive. And then second, what options might be available from an immigration standpoint. So there's a lot of uncertainty, but if you've got an employer behind you, maybe you start learning French and you're able to hit that level 5, that NCLSA level 5, then you have pathways forward. So at least to extend your permit and buy time and wait for all of this massive number of people in Canada to kind of sort themselves out and the CRS scores to hopefully come down. So that's my advice. Okay, this one is Levent Dev. If someone lives and works in Quebec but get ITA outside Quebec, French draw, do they have to move out of the province? Questions. PSTQ is too strict for non-young who received their degrees outside Canada. So yeah, do you want to address this one, Alicia?
So that intention to reside is really important. And there's a high risk of misrepresentation or express entry officer saying, look, you've been living in Quebec the entire time, you've been working in Quebec. Yes, you've got your French, but unless you can show that you have a very solid intention, and normally when I take a look at my client's history and if they have been working and living and going to school entirely in Quebec, they have that much more work to do to try to prove that they're going to move to Ontario or to a different province. And usually it's pretty solid evidence, like actually having a lease agreement signed, opening up a bank account, um, going and getting a driver's license from the province. And you can't get a driver's license until you prove that you have a residence in that province. Because if IRCC thinks that you're just going to stay in Quebec, they will refuse that application. So you will not be able to go and get your express entry PR under express entry because one of the program requirements is that you have an intention to reside anywhere other than the province of Quebec.
All right, let's jump to our next question. This one is from Olatunde. And Olatunde says, can a postgrad work permit holder attend a course that is hybrid and also for a spousal open work permit attend training course if they have restrictions? this
Uh-huh. Okay, so yeah.
I'm ringing the bell on that one,
Consult.
but Alicia, yeah, want to tackle
Consult.
that?
All right. The rule is that anybody who's here on a work permit is only authorized to work unless they are specifically authorized to study. And so normally you'd have to apply for a separate study permit if you're going to be attending a designated learning institution or in-person classes. So take a look at the program guidance. There are exceptions if you're doing 100% remote. If it's 100% distance learning, so if you look at IRCC distance learning, then you don't need a study permit because it's 100% remote. But be careful because you said it's hybrid, and that means there's some sort of in-person component. And usually what happens is even if it's everything else is online, usually the class will have an invigilation where you actually have to go into some sort of testing facility, some sort of other university, sit down physically and have a teacher check and make sure that you're not cheating when you're writing your exam. If there's an in-person component, then IRCC literally says you need a study permit for whatever portion is going to be in person. And so you don't want to get into a situation where you are studying without authorization because you're breaching the requirements of the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act and regulations. So you want to be really careful that you're not studying without authorization. The other thing where this gets tricky is on, of course, the open spousal work permits, but also when people are trying to do like a professional designation, it gets pretty complex when people are trying to do certain types of upgrades.
Exactly. Okay, let's see. I just saw one here. One person said, let's just type this in here. Okay, so I'm just going to pull this up. So Deepak says, why am I super chat not showing in comments? No clue, because you probably didn't pay for it. And that's why it's not showing up. So that is why. I went and looked to see if somehow it was just hiding somewhere, but it was not. So you probably just didn't finalize it. Okay, let's go back to our favorites. Let's see. Next is, okay, John Snow says, how to prove cash salary in current scenario. Ugh. Cash is a problem when you are trying to show that you've been paid, which is a critical component to demonstrating work history, whether it's in Canada or foreign work experience. And because generally speaking, there isn't as it's often not as well documented. And if you come from an employment situation where you're getting a reference letter, that's a good reference letter that confirms how much you're getting paid, and you're being provided pay slips, that's a huge boost. And then in those circumstances, maybe cash salary isn't, the fact you're paid in cash isn't detrimental. It's not fatal. But often I find when people are paid in cash, they also don't have pay slips. And then you run into real problems. So it's hard to show or demonstrate that the cash, if you deposit it into a bank, which is rarely the case, that cash deposit came from your employment. So anyone who's in a situation where they are being paid in cash, you definitely want to, at minimum, have a pay slip or pay stub to support it. And then as a side note, potentially if you file taxes and there's been remittances for employment taxes that your employer has made to the government or you file yourself, that can also be evidence that you did earn some income if there's another connection back to your employer. But cash can be a challenge. It can. All right, next one, Prabhat says, can you make a video on how to get an express entry PNP? Non-express entry have EOI, but not sure how express entry PNP works out. Huh. Okay, now when you talk about an expression of interest, express entry PNP, each province, the reason we don't do courses on this is because each province has their own way of doing things. In many provinces, expressions of interest are even the process of initiating your interest in going to that province starts through an expression of interest, even if it's an express entry related stream. So each province is a little bit different, and that's why we just don't have the capacity to build courses for every single stream within each province.
What I would say, Prabhat, in general, so when you've created your expression of interest in a particular province, that's one side of the coin. But the other side of the coin is you have to have a valid express entry profile. So If you actually want to get a nomination or a notification of interest to proceed under an express entry linked PNP, you've got to have both sides. You've got to have a federal express entry profile that's valid. In some provinces, you have to have a CRS score that's above 300, like in Alberta, and that express entry profile can't be older than 6 months old. But when you're looking at what's going on with the province, you also have to meet all the eligibility criteria to create an expression of interest. And most of those are based on points. Sometimes it's also making sure that you're fitting all the program eligibility criteria for that specific PNP that you're looking at applying under. And sometimes, like in Alberta, the government just decides what they want to give you a notification of interest under. So you're not in charge of which stream you apply for. Under BC, it's different. Under Ontario, it's different. You know, some of them are also employer driven. So you have to also have the employer do their piece before you can be considered.
Yeah. All right. Bayaning says, "Hey Mark, I created my Express Entry profile last week, and your Express Entry Masterclass was a big help in creating it. I really admire your hard work in creating that informative video. We are from Ottawa." Thank you so much. That's very, very kind. So I think you guys can see for the most part, this has been something that we've had for a very long time. We've got a bunch of different resources. You know, if you want to check things out initially, we've got our free PDF guide here on common express entry mistakes and how to avoid them, which is a really important one. So you can get that download for free. But we have our Express Entry Accelerator, and this 2024 edition is actually in full remake mode. So I'm hoping to get it completed before the end of 2025 or 2026. The course here itself is updated all the time. So the reality is there's nothing in here that is outdated or doesn't fully assist you in the world of express entry right as we speak. But every 2 years or so, I'll modernize it and update it a little bit. And so this is what Bianing is talking about here. And one other thing I want to share with this is that the Express Entry Accelerator, which is the course that I was showing here with all the lessons and the modules, we have 70 individual lessons that are all designed to walk you through every part of the express entry process. But ultimately, the thing that I love the most is the masterclass that we do every 2 weeks. So if for whatever reason the over 10 hours of video lessons that you have, and you can pick and choose the ones that you need, are not sufficient and you have other questions, we have somewhat of a Zoom format, kind of a webinar format, although it's different than this because you can get right on there. You can talk to me. We have camera and video and everything, and every 2 weeks, and you have access to it for life. So those who subscribe now to the 2024 edition have access to every future upgrade, and for as long as they need it, and can come back to the master classes as long as they need them. And there's nothing out there in the market like this. And those, and this is often a very, very solid way to make sure that you're avoiding those most common issues that people have, but also just to help you get through it quick. It explains everything. It shows you how to fill in the forms. It shows you why the government is even asking questions. And then, of course, the master classes are your opportunity to get any specific things that you need, answered. So thanks, Bayaning. I really appreciate that. Lots of people just look at it and say, "Oh, there's so much free stuff online. Why do I need that?" Well, thanks, Bayaning, for confirming. Okay. Razzle PR watching from Lethbridge, my hometown. That's where I'm broadcasting from. Alicia's up in Calgary. Can a spouse with an open work permit submit an expression of interest for AAIP under express entry stream, even if they don't fall under the current occupational pathway? So that's a good question. So you have to, when you're applying through the expression of interest system, you have to be eligible for something, one of the programs. We know that under express entry, now you've said that they don't fall under the current occupational pathways. Like the accelerated tech pathway doesn't require that you have an employer-specific work permit, but the Alberta Opportunity Stream does. Also, the rural renewal stream doesn't technically require you to have an employer-specific work permit, but it's pretty heavily weighted to employer-specific work permits for sure. And you
Yeah, and I'm
still
not
need to have an employer who is interested in supporting you. So yeah, Alicia.
Yeah, and it's unclear to me, Razzle, if you're asking. So this is confusing because under Alberta Express Entry Linked, you don't actually have to meet, for example, accelerated tech, right? That's just a subcategory. So you could meet Alberta Express Entry as long as you meet all the other eligibility criteria. So your spouse then would qualify under CEC or FSW. She has over 300 points. She doesn't have a profile that's too old. So take a look at that, but there's no category in that case. And if her worker EOI points are not very high because she doesn't have a job offer and that sort of thing, she may not get a notification of interest. So, you got to be eligible for one category.
Perfect. Okay, I just want to flip back here. So we do have another question. I'm going to pull this one off and I'm going to pull this one up here. So when do you believe IRCC will open the new programs under Express Entry in 2026? And so this is our crystal ball kind of world. And I think I've got a, why does it keep disappearing? I don't know. Okay, well, that's all right. I thought I had access to my crystal ball here, but I don't. Okay, so if you look here, this news release that happened back December 8th, target immigration measures to boost Canada's supply of doctors. So the government has been announcing different measures to try to expand in areas where they see um, shortages, right? And so these types of new programs, to a large extent, we see this being baked into the PNPs. I suspect that healthcare draws are going to also increase to accommodate for the need for more doctors. I don't know if they're going to create a special program, but the minister also, and I wonder, can we pull her up here? Oh, she's here with us. Great. The minister in the past has also um, made various announcements about other measures that they're thinking about. There, we'll bring the minister up here, and we have this 33,000 that they talk about. We don't know exactly what that cohort of people are going to look like. We know that they've kind of carved off a portion of the economic programs to be dedicated to this. Why they just selected 33, I don't know what that means, but well, I've got my suspicion, and we're going to be doing more videos specifically targeting that group of people. There have been some hints about people who have made connections and are connected to communities that are paying, taxes. So there's been some hints out there about what this cohort might include. But Minister Diab here, she really is one of the most silent immigration ministers we've ever had, except for the one right before her, who I don't even remember her name. She really didn't do anything. So I guess she's got it on a resume for a month or so. But yeah, Minister Diab just really doesn't appear. She doesn't really talk online. She's not active in social, and she's very unlike our past immigration ministers. And maybe that's just a way of, I don't know. She was a former lawyer. She was a former provincial minister for immigration, and at least over that portfolio. So I'm not sure why she's so quiet, but yeah, as far as what the future holds, Alicia, what do you think? We'll pull Minister Diab off because she's not helpful. So what do you think?
Yeah. I think all the things that you need to do to prepare in advance to be ready are going to be prudent to do because whatever kind of program they're going to implement, we know that they don't usually ever forego language testing, right? They don't just say, oh, not going to care about language testing. Oh, we're not going to care about education. So we know that those two things are really important. Plus, getting your background history. So making sure that you have your letters of reference from employers, making sure that you have your pay stubs and your tax documents and proof that you've actually worked the jobs that you say you've been working. And then the other thing too is making sure that you're getting police certificates. If you've been staying in countries where you know it's going to take a really long time to get police certificates and you've not gone back to that country, maybe look at applying for those police certificates so that you have everything ready to go. And as soon as they announce those program parameters, you've got what you need.
We've got a few people chiming in here on that PTB. Joy says it's pulmonary tuberculosis and positive tuberculosis. And those things are, yeah, you definitely want to redo your immigration medical. Yeah, you definitely want to do that. Thanks for helping out, guys. Appreciate that a lot. Okay, we've got a few more here. Okay, thank you. I'm a master's student here now, but a registered nurse back home in Uganda. I'm navigating RN license here in BC. Could there be a possibility to pursue a PR route as a student? Um, yeah, once again, you guys, one of the things we see more than ever is change within the PNPs. So there may be routes. Generally speaking, most provinces want to see that you have work experience in the province. And I know for BC, you almost have to hit 2 years at least to have a good shot at any of the job offer streams. Most provinces, including BC, do have some pathways for international students, but even then, in those circumstances, they still like to see that you've got some experience. So I can't say 100%, what exact route might be available for you in BC. Just because we need more information, I'd recommend that you book a consultation. But yeah, you have to be ready for anything.
But you might very well be able to create an express entry profile right now, because if that nursing experience back in Uganda is less than 3 years old, then you might already be able to prove that you've got 6 months as a registered nurse in Uganda within the last 3 years. You're working on your master's, so hopefully you also have a bachelor's degree. If you can get your education credential assessment for that and you do well on your language testing, you might be able to create a valid express entry profile under the federal stream. And there's a chance that, especially because you have that nursing experience, if it was recent enough, you might be chosen in a targeted draw for healthcare. So definitely reach out, book a consult. We'll take a look at exactly what your background and your history are, but you can do that while you're still on a study permit, right? You can create your express entry profile and have that sitting there. And if you get a healthcare draw, great, then you can move forward with that, even if you're on an active study permit doing your master's.
Yeah. Okay, Lillian says, I got an ITA. Well, congratulations. But in my profile, I answered yes to do you have a job offer, which is for LMIAs only. Can I change it to no when applying and include an LOE to explain the error since it gives no points? The short answer is yes, you may be able to do that. And the key is, as also you've identified, making sure that your letter of explanation is written properly. And ultimately, immigration officers like when things are efficient, when they don't have to wade through reams of documentation that just doesn't apply or doesn't gain points. But you absolutely have to be careful when you're making any changes from your profile information to when you're submitting your EAPR, that it doesn't negatively affect your minimum entry criteria or your eligibility through one of the programs, CRS score, things like that. So you have to be really careful. So generally speaking, yes, Lillian, you can do that, but make sure that you provide a very clear letter of explanation. In my Express Entry course, I have a section just on letters of explanation, and I like to use two different kinds. If it's related to information in my EAPR, then I have a separate one that goes in the client information section. And then if it's related to something that is supporting a document that I'm uploading, then I tend to have a separate LOE that covers off the information that's being uploaded into that individual section. So that's how we deal with that. At least I do.
Yeah, and what I'd add to that too, Lillian, is once you say yes, that I have a job offer, it then asks you a whole bunch of sub questions. And so you want to be super careful. If you said yes, you have an LMIA and you don't really have an LMIA, that's a bit more of a problem, because that's where immigration could say that's misrepresentation. But if you said, yes, I have a job offer, and you answered those questions correctly and honestly, and you said, I've been working, yes, I have, been working for over a year, but you clearly specified, I don't have an LMIA, I'm not working for a named employer on my work permit, as long as you answered it honestly, then that's not misrep. That's just saying you have a job offer, but it's not LMIA based. And of course, there are no points for arranged employment, but sometimes it's relevant to a PNP. So just go back and carefully look at what sub answers you put in that field.
All right, we've got lots of good questions coming through. I know we're not going to be able to get through all of them, but we'll keep soldiering our way through here. Okay, so the next question, let's see here. We've got Never. If a spouse had PR long ago, lived abroad, and married later, can they apply for a PRTD under the accompanying rule, or should they renounce PR to be sponsored again? Thanks so much. Gonna ring that bell again and recommend that you book a consult. But at least you want to tackle this one. So the whole concept of a permanent resident, when do you lose your permanent resident status?
Mhm. So take a look at when you got your permanent resident status. What was the day your COPR was issued, whether it was an electronic confirmation of permanent residence or a actual physical confirmation of permanent residence. That's when your clock starts ticking. And you're going to look forward for a 5-year period. And every 5-year period from your start date on your COPR is when you have to prove that you've had physical presence of at least 2 years within that 5-year period. So be super careful, because if you've been outside of Canada for more than 3 years all in a chunk, then it is possible that you have lost your permanent residence. Now, permanent residence cannot be taken away unless you voluntarily renounce it, or unless you actually have an officer say, I'm going to issue a Section 44 report on failure to meet the residency obligation as a permanent resident. So you've got to figure out, is there any way to save this? Are there humanitarian and compassionate factors for why, if there was some reason outside of your control, that you couldn't come back to Canada? But we'd need to know more information about what's going on with your scenario before we could give advice on whether it's better to try to relinquish PR and start again if you're eligible to do that. Or maybe there's some way that you can cobble together your days and say, well, it might be possible for you to still meet that residency obligation if you're within that 5-year period, and you could still hit your 730 days.
Yeah. All right. I'm not sure. Deepak says they got problems with the super chat. That's fine. I can't find it. But I'm not sure. One question, Deepak, you say, I am a newly licensed dentist. And then in your next comment, you say, my daughter is newly licensed dentist. And you're in India. I'm assuming it's probably your daughter then. So my daughter is newly licensed dentist in Canada with an expiring postgrad soon. Okay, that's kind of sad, because to have a postgrad work permit that's expiring soon, but no work experience, that's tricky. So what is the fastest legal route to bridge my status and start practicing? So once again, I'm going to ring this bell here because we need a whole lot more information. The reality is it's not so much a matter of bridging your status and starting practicing. You have to find an employer who's willing to support. I've done work permits for dentists in the past that have had job offers from dental practices in across the country. So that's a critical component. You can't just set up a shingle in the traditional sense. And I'm assuming your daughter, if the postgrad's expiring, there needs to be a pathway forward for permanent residence. And it's always employers generally that are going to support that, because you need the work experience. So if you want to book a consult, I recommend that you do that. And then we can kind of try to identify what, if any, options are available as this postgrad is expiring soon.
And the other really important thing is, if you are looking to be a dentist, then you need to be licensed in the province that you hope to work in. And
Yeah.
so if you are not already licensed within the province,
Mhm.
start on that absolutely right away, because it takes time for that association to be able to give you your credentials to be able to show that you're licensed to practice in the province. And you won't be able to work even if you find an employer who does an LMIA and you get the work permit. You've got to show that you are accredited for that province as a dentist.
Okay, let's whip through a few more. We're into overtime here a little bit. Chris says, after receiving an IT under FSW, I held 2 different positions with the same company. Should I submit 2 reference letters or one, since the rules fall under different NOC codes? We always submit 1 letter. In fact, the instructions that IRCC provides themselves it confirms that you need to list all the positions that you've worked in with the company. So we do that, but you also have to be careful if they're falling under different NOC codes, then you need to describe them separately. If the duties have changed that pushes it from one NOC to a next, then you need to break down those duties for each position. So in a way, you're including all of that critical information for both positions, including the hours worked, the wage, the duties, those kinds of things need to be separated out so that an officer can assess each of them individually if you've indicated they're different NOC codes. Mhm. And all of this is covered in the course, and we work through this with our clients all the time. But you really have to be careful. One of the things that I'll point out that we haven't really talked about with work history is how critical it is to go back through your whole history now. You have to go back. You have to look at what you put in your original study permit application if you came as a student, what you've put in subsequent work permit applications, or how it's been described. Sometimes you'll have, if you work for a big company, sometimes they'll have counsel that has helped you, a consultant or a lawyer, and often you have to watch really carefully to make sure that all of your work history was properly disclosed in those original ones, because if it wasn't and now you're adding new things in for your EAPR, you could run into some really serious problems. So we deal with this very carefully with our clients. And at the end of the day, it's your responsibility, if there are discrepancies, to try to alert immigration to it in advance and then explain what happened. So be very cautious with that.
Yeah, and what I've seen recently is people who had two positions at the same employer, and when they had done their study permit application, they just bunched that into one,
Yep.
right? They
Put
just
it in
said start
together.
date,
Yeah.
end date, and they only said one job title instead of putting two job titles. And so Mark is 100% correct. When you are putting in your work experience, if it's different knocks, you've got to put different periods of work. If it's different hours, if it's different pay, if it's significantly different job duties, if you're working in a different city. And IRCC is going to go back and take a look at all your previous applications. And if you describe that very differently in the past and your letters from your employer just kind of grouped everything into one, you've got to be super careful on that.
Mhm. Okay, we'll try to get through a few more here. Karn says, got CEC invite yesterday. And then it says, for the employer reference letter, should I ask them to draft, since I switched to a PGWP, or also include internship history? Continue to work with same employer after grad. So you want to be comprehensive in the letters. You want to identify what you did with them. But at the end of the day, you're only going to list in your actual work history the work that you have eligible, that's eligible for CEC or for comprehensive ranking system score. And so if you're in full-time studies and you are working, you can't use that towards your CEC. So yeah, we tell our employers to be pretty clear. They don't need to go into a whole bunch of detail about work history that you're not going to get points for, but it's still worthwhile to disclose it and make sure it's in the letter.
And here's one wrinkle on that is you
Mm-hmm.
have if you get an ITA, you have to say whether you've, done something without authorization, or you should clarify
Mm-hmm.
that. And so it's important that when you're asking your employer for reference letters, be careful, because sometimes the employer just says, "Oh, the start date was when you were a student, you worked full time the whole time." But often that's not true. Often you worked part time while you were a student, and it's important for the employer because it's illegal for them to pay you if you're not authorized to work and employ you if you're not authorized to work. So you want to make sure that you met your study permit obligations and how many hours you were authorized to work. And this gets complex because there were temporary public policies for students where for some periods of time it allowed you to work full time, and then you could work full time during authorized breaks. So you've got to be careful and do be honest and make sure that your HR or the company actually checks your pay and how many hours you were working for different periods, and they don't just go back and say you were working full time while you were a student if that's not true.
Yeah. Okay, and this is a real tough one here that Subin says, Subin Chaco. Cooks have really driven up the knock for trades. Often cooks tend to have gone through and obtained post-secondary education that has been assessed, and they've gotten points for it, whereas regular trades don't have that luxury. So the trades, yes, it's been over 500 for points. And yeah, I get the fact that there's fake cooks and they should be removed. But as long as there's a market for it and people are willing to pay, and when the individual and the employer are both crooked, neither of them want to come forward, so it's hard to get evidence. And yeah, it's sad, the corruption that's kind of filtered into the system a little bit. But the reality is, I agree that there is a need for cooks, and yeah, like it or not, we don't have, our crystal ball doesn't tell us how to deal with this kind of stuff. But I hear you. I hear you, I guess, is part of the reason I wanted to bring your comment up. All right, Ijov Wokil del Diegebe. That's awesome. With a knock code 412 be under the new category-based draws for leadership and innovation coming in 2026. Once again, this crystal ball right here, maybe, yeah. Alicia's trying to find it here. There we go. Now we got it right here. We're rubbing it.
So we do know that when they're looking at leadership roles, we want to take a look at the National Occupation Classification Code matrix. And the way that you kind of deconstruct this is it's a 5-digit code, and you want to be looking at the second digit in your 5-digit code. So we look at the 0. So things that are normally senior managerial are the zeros, and then some of them are the 1. There's some supervisory managerials under the 1, but the 0 is usually kind of your highest level of past education, training and experience, seniority in the position, and usually you are actually managing, not just managing in name, but actually managing other people, and you have a reporting structure that's pretty senior. And
Yeah.
so hopefully there will be some clarification in terms of who's going to be our senior managers coming for next year. It used to be, of course, when they gave points for job offers, it was a double 0. So it wasn't just that you had a 0 in there somewhere, but you had to have a 0-0 knock. So it needed to begin with a 0-0.
Yeah. Okay, Krish says, is payslips mandatory for previous job or only for current job? For any work history that you are including, although the instructions on the express entry in the portal say that payslips, if available, boy, you want to have them. So whether it's your current job or whether it's a previous job, if you're including it in the work history section of express entry, yes, you absolutely want to have them. Okay. Kay says, if permanent residence is approved through the OINP employer job offer stream, non-express entry, is the applicant allowed to resign from their employer immediately after receiving PR status? Okay, this is something that we never want to see happen. If an employer is supporting you all the way through to get your PR, and the province is, approving you on the basis that you're working for that employer, to just resign immediately after you've received your PR status, that's kind of bush. I don't really like to see that. Is there a specific rule that says that you can't, change jobs or do something else? Well, no, not expressly. But if you're in the process of finalizing your permanent resident application and you've already left that job, immigration could unravel that and say, hey, you no longer have your job, you're not working for them. And in the same light, if you're in the process of like, if it's not an e-coper, well, I guess everything is e-coper, but if somehow it came to light that you while you were finalizing that you were no longer working, then that could be an issue for you. So yeah, we advise caution on that.
Yeah, like make
Okay,
sure that you're
Sager.
finally
Oh,
landed.
yep. Yeah. Sager's got a super chat. Looks like it works for Sager here. I got an ITA yesterday. Okay, I'll give you some applause. My file was non-accompanying file. After adding my spouse still above cutoff, can I add her after getting an ITA? I'm going to hit the triangle. Sager, book a consult. We can talk about this because this can be a challenge. If you're adding a spouse after you get an ITA that was listed as non-accompanying at the beginning, you've got two things you got to deal with. One is, well, are you representing or misrepresenting something that isn't accurate? I don't know where your spouse is. If they're with you in Canada and you said that they're non-accompanying, that can be another whole issue. But when you add a spouse after, then they will reassess your points. And if you're still above the cutoff after the spouse is added, well, that's something that we can talk about. There may be the possibility of adding her, but you have to do it right. You have to be very, very careful how you describe this because they are looking for every opportunity to catch people who they feel are trying to game the system. And yeah, it's painful. I hate how they treat spouses, but it is what it is. Okay. Here's a good one. Sear USA, Sirusa, number 12, asks a question that I cover extensively in my Express Entry course. In fact, in the travel history section. So he says, should information that's already listed in the travel history section of an EAPR in the personal activity section of an EAPR? So this is a little bit tricky because for Express Entry, and I think it is EAPR, the travel history is where you're going, where you're visiting, right? The personal history includes things like where you're working, where you're studying. And so does it overlap? Well, I wouldn't say it's repeating information, because the purpose of your travel should be something of a temporary nature. If you're actually relocating from your home country to Canada, say to study, I don't include that as a travel history. That's an address change. And then obviously, if you're coming to study, then it will show up on your personal activities as study. So you want to make sure everything's consistent across all of those different things. But there might be some circumstance. I'm trying to think where you would have travel overlapping. But for me, it's all about the address and the travel history overlapping that maybe is redundant and you wouldn't need to redo. Anything else to add to that, Alicia?
Yeah, you just want to make sure that there's no gaps in time and also that your activities are clear, right? So if you're studying, where are you studying? If you're changing your place of study or you're studying remotely, then you might need to explain that in your LOE, in addition to being really careful about your addresses, your travel history, and what you put on your personal activities. So there's no gaps. And also so that they can do background security checks, and then it's going to trigger when you need your police certificates properly. So it can get tricky, especially if you're taking longer trips all in one block that will change your address history.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Jignesh, we actually talked about this one earlier. He says, Mark and Alicia, any idea why IRCC is not issuing any e-copers? Well, the reality is because they've probably hit their quota. Now, I can't confirm that this is 100% the case, but if I was to pull up the crystal ball here and rub the crystal ball, I would suspect that they've hit their quota for the year, and in January, then those e-copers will start to come. That's my view on that one. All right, and then the last one, let's see. This happens a lot. Vancouverite boy says has rejected work permit under SUV despite being under priority stream and having double the required funds. The rejection says no tie to the country, no plan to go back. What's your advice? Well, the reality is I think we've seen this before, and there's been federal court cases now that have come out that confirms that IRCC has the ability to refuse. And just because the province says that it's a priority doesn't mean that IRCC has to treat it that way too. And it's, ultimately when you're submitting these work permit applications, you need to address the tie question and things like that. You can't just ignore it, which sometimes some council do that. They just focus on something they think is just a slam dunk, and then they don't provide the bona fide stuff on the fact you're going to comply with the temporary stay, especially when it's in the context of a PR application. So they really do not like SUVs. It's not a secret that IRCC has a real hate on for SUVs right now, and the policies and practices they've put in place to try to reduce the numbers, largely because they perceive lots of fraud once again in those programs. And so there could be a whole host of reasons, but yeah, when you have a refused work permit in those circumstances, if you're within the timeline, you can consider a judicial review of that refusal. But other than that, this is a reality with SUVs now.
But get on it
Okay.
right away, because if
Yes.
you're looking at JR, you've got 15 days from that decision on the refusal letter,
Yeah.
so it would have to be fast.
Yeah, exactly. All right. And then we'll finish off with Phoenix here. Do you think 500 score will get CEC draw by May 2026? Alicia, get over there. There we go.
Uh,
Rub that thing.
um,
There it
there we
is.
go. There we go. Oh, I think 500 is a reach. I think 500 is a reach. I think it needs to be probably it needs to be, I'm gonna say
It's hovering in the cloud here.
514. 514.
514. All right. That sounds probably realistic. Okay, guys, thanks so much for joining us today. Another great live Q&A as always, whether you're watching on YouTube or some of the other partner platforms that we have. It's our pleasure to be here. As a firm, we are here to support you. If you need a consultation, all you need to do is slide over to our firm website. And when you do that, you have the ability to then just click on a link. So if we go to our main screen here, you can click on Speak to a Lawyer. You can click on this link up here. It will take you right to our booking consultation spot. And then you can choose and book a 25 or 50-minute consult with myself or Alicia or Igor. We'd love to help you and work with you. Remember, as I said before, that if you're going through express entry, we have lots of clients that we're working with right now. It's just super volatile, and there just isn't room for error anymore within the process. So we are representing many, many people with their express entry applications, and this is really what we love to do is express entry. It's something we spend a lot of time focusing on, as you can see within our material. that we do online. But also we have the Express Entry Accelerator. And like I said, I'm in the process of upgrading this, but anyone who purchases the 2024 edition, it's already been updated numerous times since it was first created 2 years ago, but at least this version. But we will have another one that will be coming up, and you'll have full access to that, as well as the masterclass that happens every 2 weeks. So you can keep coming back for life as long as you want. So it's pretty, yeah, I love doing that. And I'm the one who runs this. So we've got lots of resources for you, especially on our website, our blog post, as well as all the videos that we have. Over 1,000 now. That's hard to believe, 1,000 videos that we've done on YouTube. So thank you everyone for following and for supporting us. And we want to continue to wish everyone, I guess, 17 is Christmas? 5
Like
to 3.
the
Wow.
24th is next week. Yeah.
The 24th. Well, maybe I'll go live. We'll see. But we want to wish you all a very, very Merry Christmas and a happy holidays wherever you are, you and your family. And yeah, thanks so much for everyone. I can't help but give Amir a little shout out here. He said, I've been waiting 5 years to post this comment. I got an ITA. I just saw it. You get 2, my friend. So good. And that's, some of you are doing everything that you can. So the Zeus says, when I eventually get my PR, I'll dedicate it to God and you guys. Oh, you guys are awesome. So kind. All right. Thanks so much, everyone. Wish you all the best, like we said before. And